Stick around to the very end of this video because the last 30 seconds of Brand New Day might be the single biggest tease Marvel has dropped all year, and it has nothing to do with Doctor Doom. But to actually understand what that ending means, we need to walk through everything that leads up to it first. So let's go character by character, right through to that post-credit scene, because it's going to hit a lot harder once you know what to look for. Start with Hulk, because his reappearance alone is a bigger deal than it looks. The last time we saw full Savage Hulk was Infinity War, right before Thanos beat him into submission and Bruce couldn't transform again for the rest of that story. On the MCU's internal timeline, that's roughly 2018. Brand New Day is set around 2028. That's a full decade of Bruce actively refusing to let Hulk out again, not because he can't, but because he's built an entire peaceful life he doesn't want to risk losing. That's why it takes something as violent as Jean Grey forcing her way into his mind to break him. She invades his psychic space looking for her missing sister and answers about a program called WEMAX, and in the process, she shatters the mental blocks Bruce spent years building to keep Hulk contained. The result? Full Savage Hulk loose in the middle of New York fighting Spider-Man in a short but genuinely fun sequence. Here's the detail worth slowing down on. Right before Hulk falls, Peter doesn't talk him down as Spider-Man. He reminds them that he's Peter Parker. The movie doesn't spell out why that specific detail matters, but there's a reading that connects back to the comics, where, memorably, Hulk is one of the only people who still remembers Peter's real identity even after the rest of the world is magically made to forget it. In the MCU, Tom Holland's Peter and Bruce Banner have never actually shared a scene together on screen, so if Bruce does know who's under the mask, the most logical off-screen moment for that reveal is Tony Stark's funeral, which would also explain why Peter introduces himself to Bruce using Ned's name earlier in the film. If Bruce's memory of Peter Parker is tied to that funeral, then it's genuinely Hulk who processes hearing that name again, not Bruce. Small detail, but it's exactly the kind of connective tissue this franchise tends to pay off 2 or 3 movies later. After the fight, Bruce gets moved to a psychiatric facility, except no ordinary psychiatric ward is holding the Hulk. All signs point to this actually being the Raft, where Thaddeus Ross's Red Hulk and the leader are both already confirmed to be locked up, following Captain America: Brave New World, a movie that ended with the leader talking about an oncoming invasion. That's a loaded setup Marvel could easily pay off later, though, given everything else scheduled, Hulk showing up in Avengers Doomsday looks unlikely. Secret Wars, on the other hand, feels almost guaranteed.
Sadie Sink's character is confirmed as a young, still developing Jean Grey, deliberately not yet at full comic-accurate power level, which is why some of the marketing's psychic teases felt like they undersold what she could actually do. The movie doesn't explicitly explain how she got her powers, but the implication is straightforward. She's a mutant, and her abilities activated the way they typically do in the source material, triggered by puberty or by severe personal trauma. That trauma is the film's darkest moment. Jean's sister sent her one final telepathic message before her death, a single broken word, WEMAX, that doesn't mean anything on its own. The implication is devastating. Her sister's mind was so damaged by whatever happened to her in that facility that it's the only fragment she could send before she died. When Jean finally understands what happened to her sister, her powers detonate. She doesn't just influence one mind anymore. She creates a psychic bubble that puts everyone inside it under her direct control, which is exactly how she orchestrates that unnervingly coordinated hand ninja attack on Spider-Man. It doesn't look like several fighters working together. It looks like one brain moving several bodies. The obvious question, if this mutant gene can activate in anyone, why hasn't the MCU seen it before now? The film doesn't over-explain it, but the setup implies it's simply been dormant, waiting for the right trigger, which tracks with how mutant activation typically works in the comics. Jean doesn't get sent to the Raft with Bruce. She escapes. Given everything Marvel has been building toward, expect her to resurface properly in Secret Wars, likely as part of the first real X-Men team. Here's the detail that stings. The inhibitor collar technology, the kind that can shut down a mutant's powers entirely, gets set up in this movie as a prototype that Peter Parker himself invents. If Marvel follows through on that thread, Spider-Man may end up indirectly responsible for creating one of the X-Men's most dangerous future weapons. That's a genuinely uncomfortable piece of foreshadowing, and it's easy to miss on a first watch. The emotional spine of the film is Peter finally sitting with the consequences of the choice he made at the end of No Way Home. MJ learns the truth about who Peter really is, but she doesn't remember their relationship, a genuinely rare piece of MCU maturity in how it's handled. Because she has no memory of loving him, she doesn't perform feelings she doesn't have, but something still keeps pulling her back toward him anyway. The film ends on her, alone on a rooftop, quietly fidgeting with the necklace tied to their relationship and smiling. Deliberately unresolved, Marvel clearly hasn't decided where this goes next, and the ambiguity is the point. After taking a bullet meant to kill him, Spider-Man ends up in surgery, meaning his mask had to come off in front of medical staff, quietly raising the stakes on how many people now know his face. Jean apparently helped stabilize his breathing afterward, which raises its own question, given that a ventilator could have done the same job unless she's doing something more specific, like actively preventing brain death. Either way, the Frank Castle banter that follows is a genuine tonal left turn for the character, warmer, funnier, more human than the brooding Punisher we're used to. Now here's what we've been building toward. In the post-credit scene, we see the in-universe Spidey Tracker app, the one used earlier to monitor Spider-Man's movements, pinging his location in Queens. It beeps steadily, zooms out, confirms he's still on Earth. Then a voice announces a new Spider-Man location has been found. The tracker glitches, and when it resolves, Spider-Man's new location is shown out in space. Here's the theory. That's not Tom Holland's Spider-Man. His tracker signal never moves from Queens throughout the scene. It's still pinging there right up until the new location appears, which means the tracker has picked up an entirely different Spider-Man on an entirely different Earth. Most likely candidates, Tobey Maguire or Andrew Garfield's versions of the character. The glitch itself likely represents an incursion, one universe colliding catastrophically with another, and the location update, floating alone in space with no planet beneath him, mirrors almost exactly how Thor was found drifting after Thanos' ship was destroyed in Infinity War. If that reading's right, it strongly suggests one of those two universes just lost its Earth entirely, which lines up with everything reported about Avengers Doomsday's central multiversal collapse. Given Doomsday leans hard into legacy actor nostalgia, betting on a face audiences already know, Maguire or Garfield, makes far more narrative sense than introducing a brand new live-action Spider-Man cold in an ensemble movie already juggling this many characters. A newer, less familiar Spider-Man variant feels like it's being saved for Secret Wars instead, where there's more room to properly introduce him. The scene closes on 3 words: Spider-Man will return. No name, no timeline, just confirmation that whichever Spider-Man that tracker just found, we're not done with this thread. And given the timing, we might not be waiting long to find out. That's the full ending, front to back. Hulk's decade of silence, Jean Grey's origin, the weapon Peter didn't know he was building, and a post-credit scene that might be quietly setting up the biggest Spider-Man reveal of the whole multiverse saga. Which Spider-Man do you think that tracker found? Drop your theory below and subscribe, because if this connects into Doomsday the way it looks like it will, we're going to have a lot more to break down very soon.